Oh, me, oh, my.
This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Who's got it better than us?
Nobody.
You got a date with justice.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into today's episode of the Justice Report. I'm your host, Brandon Justice. You can follow me on Twitter at Land of Justice, the podcast on Twitter at Detroit Podcast, and also all of my words in writing on landof10.com/Michigan. Obvious what we're talking about this week. The opponent is Indiana. Also get to mix in some basketball because that team looks kind of promising. By the time you hear this, we probably won't have the results of the SMU game, of course, that's going on Friday night. But nonetheless, the basketball team blew out Marquette 79-61, led by as many as 26. So looks promising for them thus far. I mean, obviously only 3 games in. 2 of them coming against opponents that you really can't evaluate a performance on. But with Marquette, definitely a good team, probably a tournament team. Almost always is a tournament team. So, yeah, I mean, that's something to take away from. Neutral site when lead by as many as 26, end up winning by 18 points. Mark Donnell showing some strength down low for once. Also mixing in his good offense. It looks more consistent. It has been all 3 games. Look at Moritz Wagner, Mo Wagner, Big Mo. Couple of dunks. You can see his strength that's really gotten better. Still has some things to work on, obviously, but he's a guy to look out for in Big Ten play. But no name has been said more than DJ Wilson, the man who donned short shorts. Had a double-double last night. I think it was 12 and 10. Also had 2 blocks. He's had back-to-back games with double-digit rebounds. Last game was off the bench. This game against Marquette, he got in the starting 5 for the first time in his career. So a great start to the season for DJ Wilson for Michigan basketball. Some positivity from a team that really, not many people expected much from going in. But obviously, once Big Ten play rolls around, we'll see what kind of team this is. But what the focus is the football team, obviously. Game 11, only 2 left. We've got Michigan and Indiana on Saturday. Michigan returns to Ann Arbor. It's senior day. Always an emotional time. Again, they decided to go with 3:30. Again, not what I would have picked from a media standpoint, but that's all right. So I get a 3:30 game, senior day. A lot of emotions on the field. I mean, obviously, coming off of a loss, that's tough. But more so because it's these seniors. It's their last game. A few underclassmen, not underclassmen, but a few juniors, I should say. That possibly this could be their last game in the big house should they forego and go to the draft. And obviously this is there's a lot on the line. You lose, you're out. You win, you're still in. Michigan has their backs are against the wall right now. They have to win to stay in the college football playoff talk, essentially to stay in the Big Ten championship talk. Because unless Penn State drops to one of Michigan State, and let me see who their next opponent is after that. So one of Michigan State or Rutgers, 2 of the bottom teams in the conference, then Penn State will actually win the East should Michigan lose one more time, no matter what Ohio State does, because they have that head-to-head win. So a lot in the line on Saturday, a lot more than just a game to stay alive with senior day and all that. And then on the other side, you have Ohio State going up against Michigan State. Obviously, there's going to be bad weather, some rain in East Lansing. Weather can do a lot of things, and this is something that could happen, I guess. I mean, last year Michigan State faced them in the rain and they won. I mean, obviously that was in Columbus, which is more to the point. But obviously this team isn't what it was a year ago. I don't see that game being really remotely close, but it's worth noting that that's there. And obviously Ohio State would have Michigan next week. Gonna have a couple guests on the show today. Michael Spath, as I'm sure most of you know who that is. He hosts a show on 10:50 a.m. WTKA. That is Monday through Friday from 10 a.m. to 12, called Inside the Huddle. Him and Jeffrey Childs host that. Jeffrey, the producer / co-host, sort of, I guess you could say. He's doing great. Both of those guys doing a great show. I appeared on there earlier in the week. Start going on there weekly once recruiting season kind of rolls around, when the football season ends. And then we'll also have Sam Bohesian on from the Indiana Rivals site. Sam, a great guy, going to come on and give us some insight as in the Hoosiers' perspective. Haven't been able to do that in a few weeks, so I'll be glad to have Sam on. And then when we get Spath on the show, we're going to do something a little bit different. Doc had given me the idea a few weeks ago, and I wanted to make sure I picked the right person. But we're going to have Spath on the show to talk about a story about him in general, just his kind of like his journey to where he's been. A very interesting story. He had a lot of crazy things happen that some know about, some don't know about. So some really interesting stuff. So we're going to bring Michael onto the show when we get back. Going to take a very brief break here to set him up. When we get back, we will have Mr. Spath on the show. You are listening to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Doc and Jock here for Fanatic U. If you're looking for some sweet sports swag and you love your Detroit teams, and I mean you really love your Detroit teams, you got to check out fanaticu.com and get the coolest gear out there and rock your Red Wings shirt, rock your Lions shirt, rock your Piston apparel. Wear it till the wheels fall off. Michigan State, you know what? They got it too. Check out Fanatic U. They have 6 locations all over Metro Detroit. Check them out, fanaticu.com.
Yeah, we coming now. Come on. Yeah, that's right. We put it down. It's like a family in here, just a little disabled. Putting it down, we lay them out on the table. Yeah. Who's in the house? The brothers in the house. Gotta turn it on out, let you know what we about. Kinda like Cain and Abel, a bit unstable. Don't be breaking the brain, break the whole damn table.
All right, welcome back to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Thanks, guys, for tuning in. As I mentioned before the break, today our special guest, one of two, we have Michael Spath. Michael, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well, man. It's a beautiful day here today.
Yeah, it is. It's middle of November. I saw a guy with his top down and his convertible on my way here. So global warming is starting to become much more real than foreseen. So Michael Spath, the reason we're bringing him on today is because I think he's been a great help in my short-lived career thus far. And he has an interesting story, and I wanted to be assistance to help tell it in a way and share it because I think it's an awesome story. So he used to work he went to U of M, then worked for the Wolverine, and was the main beat guy there, correct?
One of them. I mean, John Board and Chris Ballas, myself, all kind of share the responsibility covering the football team. But one of the guys that covered the Michigan football team for about 15 years working for the Wolverine.
And now he decided to, change it up a little bit, and now he's doing radio. So he hosts a show every day on 1050 WTKA from 10 to 12 titled Inside the Huddle with Michael the Boss Spath. And his partner in crime is Jeff Childs, also a good guy. Both a great show. Definitely check it out. So you can hear it on WTKA.com as well if you're not in the Ann Arbor area. But that is Michael before we get into the backstory of everything. So, Michael, we're happy to have you on today. I appreciate you coming on to the Jabrones show. Now, I know it's not it's not the most professional show in the world to you, but that's okay. We're happy to have you on.
Hey, you know what? Don't put words in my mouth, man. Here's the secret to being a good host. Never put words in the guest host because you may never know. I may think that you're the greatest guy in the world. Now, of course, I don't, but I might have said that had you not prefaced it by allowing me to just start ribbing you already.
Well, I made the assumption that you weren't going to say that. So, and I think that's been the subject matter for us for quite a while now. Funny story. Before we dive in, I wanted to say how we met, and it's really hilarious. It's not hilarious, but it is to me because I feel like as soon as Spath and I met, we just immediately began like ripping on each other. Like that was just the immediate thought. It just bounced off as soon as it happened. We met at Big Ten Media Day in Chicago. I can't remember what month that was. Out July or August? I think that was August.
It was in July.
July. Okay, so it was in July that we had first met. Of course, I had heard a lot about him as I worked at the Wolverine before too. So I had heard a lot about him. I actually was in his old desk, so it was very awkward at first because that's kind of how Brandon Brown, recruiting writer over at Rivals at the Wolverine, that's how he introduced us, was that I had stolen his desk kind of. So it was a little awkward for me at first because I got myself, 5'8", 19-year-old at the time, meeting the 30, however old you are, guy who
36, yeah.
36, looks like he's 37, and it was just awkward at first. And then all of a sudden, he and I felt like we hit it off. I could be completely wrong. You might think it was the worst meeting of all time. But from that moment forward, Spath and I have been really cool. I've heard his story, and I'm excited to share what he's willing to share with us today because it's really awesome. So, Spath, thank you, my friend.
Yeah, I would say our first meeting, I don't know that it was awkward, but I mean, yeah, you're meeting someone that used to work at the Wolverine and now someone that works at the Wolverine. While you didn't inherit my job, you inherited, a job there. But I would agree with you that fairly quickly there was a ability to just kind of be friends, and I was able to. I hopefully gave you a couple of tips on how to navigate the Wolverine, and you figured the best one out, which was to leave as fast as possible. So I feel like you heeded my advice. So I feel like, man, if someone's going to willing to listen to me, and you did, then I'm all in favor of that person.
Yeah, I definitely absorbed Spath's message to me, which he kind of just pretty much transparently put it out there what it was. But no, he was there when a lot of people. I wasn't comfortable with telling a lot of people the situation that was going on in my transition. He was a guy that I trusted in a very short time, and now have become pretty good. I mean, obviously, Spath and I can't just go hang out. I can't even get into a bar. So for Spath and I to just go hang out, it just doesn't happen. That's just not how this works. So we're good. We text every now and then, but for me to be like, hey, Michael, let's go do this, I'm pretty sure he would say no. I'm pretty sure he and his equal age girlfriend wouldn't be down to hang out with myself and my equal age girlfriend. It just wouldn't happen.
Yeah, you're 100% accurate about this statement. Yeah, there's no way in the world I'm ever going to hang out with you outside of a professional situation. No, that's not true. That's not true. That's not true at all. You're like that younger cousin I have that every once in a while I get together with. So someday, but probably not until you turn 21.
Yeah, we got until August, and then all of a sudden, Michael and I we're gonna be like stepbrothers, forced to hang out because I want to, and Mom says we have to. So that's how it's gonna be every day. Chili's on Monday, Applebee's on Tuesday.
Yeah, that sounds terrible, honestly. So,
all right, well, let's get into why you're here. Let's start out, and obviously I'm going to guide this little timeline of Michael Spath's heroic story. But let's start off with this. You went to Michigan, and did you major in journalism there? What was the major there?
I did not major in journalism. There's actually not a journalism program at Michigan. The University of Michigan Michigan Daily, the student newspaper, is very good. But I did not get into that either. Just a little bit slow. Was trying to go to business school. Did not get accepted to the Michigan Business School. So redirected and went to the university, the kinesiology school, which is kind of like sports management that gives you an opportunity to pursue a career in athletics, whether that's on the professional level or the college level or even the high school level. So started with that. Got my degree in 2002. Had a really fun couple of years, especially my last 2 years at Michigan. Then proceeded to, once I graduated, I moved to Hillsdale, Michigan for a couple of months to be the sports editor for the Hillsdale Daily News, and absolutely loathed it. Absolutely could not stand being there. Too small of a town for me by far. Just didn't want to have anything to do with a tiny podunk town like that. No, you know what, people, if that's what your thing is, you're from a small town, you know what, that's your preference. But for me, growing up in a suburb of Detroit, it was just way too small, and I needed to get out of there as fast as I could.
Yeah, I think you and I can agree on a lot of things. Can't agree on some. That's something we can definitely agree on. I went to school in Midland for a semester, for those of you who don't know. Left for the exact same reason. So after you left the Hillsdale News, where you were being the editor there, what came after that? And I'm pretty sure this led you to the Wolverine. What came after that, and how did that kind of happen? How did the Wolverine transition happen for you?
Well, when I was a college student, even before then, my dad was a subscriber to the Wolverine magazine. It started in 1989. I think he started subscribing in like 91, 92. And so I was always reading it. I used to go to Moe's Sports Shop on North University. Every Wednesday it came out, and I would pick it up and I would read it cover to cover. And so when I saw that there was an opening at the Wolverine, applied, met John Borton and Chris Ballas, had a good interview with them, was able to convince them that I was worth taking a chance on, because I was still pretty young and pretty green when it came to journalism, very much similar to yourself, Mr. Justice. And so I just started there, and it started off as a weekly magazine that we did like weekly all the way through April, and then it was like a monthly in May, June, July, and August. And the evolution of the Wolverine became, we started having a website. We partnered with Rivals.com, which eventually was bought by Yahoo Sports. And we started producing daily content. We used to always like to think of ourselves as the ESPN.com of like Michigan Wolverines. So everything you always needed to know, you could get from the Wolverine.com. Now, whether, that's kind of changed a little bit. Journalism has changed so much, and there's so many more competitors. There's so many more free sites. The Land of 10 has obviously risen up the last year. There's so many people doing so many different things nowadays, and so journalism has changed quite a bit. But back then it was a magazine. It evolved into a monthly magazine and focused more on the website. My evolution changed from being just a lowly beat writer to getting more and more responsibility, first an associate editor, where I had certain, in charge of freelancers or in charge of photography, and then becoming the managing editor in my last 3 years, and I was essentially in charge of the entire editorial process at the Wolverine. Whatever we put on the website, whatever we put in the magazine every month, those are the decisions that I was making, along with a great team of John Borden, Chris Ballas, Brandon Brown, Tim Sullivan, to come up with the best possible content for our subscribers. So it was a great journey. Really enjoyed it for 15 years, but there's always a time to move on, and I certainly reached that point last spring.
So for you, there was a point in time, and I think when was it that the surgery had to be done with you?
So in the summer of 2014, I was having some shoulder and neck pain. I went and got an MRI, and they found that I had something called Chiari malformation, which is this really interesting thing that happens when you're born. So you're born with it. I had it for 34 years at that point. Your brain stem, the bottom of your brain stem, was growing outside of my skull. So they needed to put my brain back into my skull. And this is not a science fiction story. This is the actual goodness to God truth, that they need to put my brain back into my skull. And so I had some surgery. I went to the University of Chicago, which had the best neurosurgeon in the country that did this particular surgery. Had it done in August of 2014, where they cut out a piece of the back of my skull. They literally take their hand and push the brain back into place. Then they put in a synthetic plate to take the place of your skull. They sew you back up, and they send you on your way after a couple of days in the hospital.
How long did it take you to recover from that?
Well, it should have taken about 6 weeks. But if a couple of years ago, I think this happened to Tom Brady, where he got a staph infection in his knee after a surgery, and there's always the risk of infection. And so I think it was about 10 days after my surgery, I was actually watching a dreadful football game between Michigan and Notre Dame. The game that Devin Gardner, I think it was really low scoring. I think the Irish beat Michigan like maybe 10-3 or 14-7. I don't really remember very well because I had a massive headache and was taken to the emergency room and learned that I had bacterial meningitis, which is an extremely serious, infection to have. It infects your brain and infects your spinal cord, the nerves that are going up and down your spine. And so I was put in an ICU, actually at the University of Chicago. I was in there for 3 days, had a whole bunch of antibiotics. I was in a hospital for 7 days, got sent home with a policy to do my own antibiotics. I had people stay with me for a couple of weeks before I was strong enough to do it myself. Was injecting IV fluids into my arm 3 times a week for 8 weeks, all through that 2014 crummy football season. So it was as bad as the team was on the field. I didn't really care too much because I was in a lot of distress. So it was interesting. And then I got cleared by my medical staff. They said I was all good. I could go off the medicine. And 2 weeks later, Michigan had played Indiana in football. It's actually a game where Devin Gardner and Jeremy Gallon had record-setting days. Gardner threw for 500 yards. Gallon had more than 350 yards receiving. And the next day, this headache came back and the meningitis came back. And I stayed at the University of Michigan, and I was in the University of Michigan ER and ICU for, I think, like 4 days. Stayed in the hospital a couple more days after that. Finally got sent home and repeated the whole procedure of doing IV fluids into my arm for a couple of weeks. I think 6 weeks this time. Finally was given a clean bill of health in mid to late January of 2015, and that's kind of what my story is.
So for you, it was a weird path to the end of your tenure at the Wolverines. So you went from, and I just want to go over from where we started to now. You went from Hillsdale to the editor at the Wolverine, and then you're there for as long as you are. You're carrying on more responsibility to the point where you're the managing editor, calling all the shots in there, and then you have to get your brain put back into your skull. That leads to meningitis. The meningitis goes away. You get it back again. And then when you get out, you see, well, when you originally got out, you got to see Michigan break a bunch of records against Indiana. Then you're back in the hospital. But since then, you've been healthy, correct?
Correct, yes. I've been healthy the last year and a half or so.
Which has to be refreshing.
So I feel very fortunate that I was able to survive this, because there were certainly days that my family members didn't think I was going to survive. So I was able to survive this and continue on with my life. And now I'm doing something I love. I've always done something I've loved. There's certainly been hardships and struggles in any job. I think people will tell you that. You can follow your passion, but some days are less passionate than others.
Right.
And when you get to that point in your career and you don't really love what you're doing anymore, you should probably think about moving on. And that's definitely a situation that was kind of forced on me a little bit too. I will be honest. I mean, if the role that I had envisioned, the role that I had been promised was available and what we had agreed to, I would probably still be at the Wolverine. But that wasn't the case. Things were taken off the table, and it led to some frustration and led to us say, all right, this is enough. I don't want to be here anymore. And that's what led to the next change in career.
So for you, let's see. We're at the end of your tenure at the Wolverine, which was around May of this year.
May of 2016, correct?
Right. Okay, so we're at May of 2016. You're on your way out the Wolverine. I remember you went on to WTKA and kind of shed some light on what it was, and then that led you to run Wisconsin Rivals, that rival site of Wisconsin, right?
Well, so I talked to the publisher, the owner of the Wisconsin rival site, Badger Blitz. We discussed forming a partnership. My intention was to move to Madison and take over the Badger Blitz site for Rivals.com. When that was all going on, WTK approached me about doing a show. It was actually going to be an afternoon slot. So they approached me about doing a show. We agreed to some terms. I continued to work for Badger Blitz behind the scenes, but I had to at that point say I'm not going to be in a position to be a 50-50 partner. So I've been acting more as a consultant to the great team that they have covering the Badgers in Madison, and then moved on to a bigger role with WTKA, of course, having my own show, Inside the Huddle, from 10 a.m. to noon, 5 days a week on 1050. And so that's really been my focus for the last 3.5 months.
The story here is that Michael, he's been through a lot. I wanted to tell it because I know some people know it. I would think the majority of media that's been here for long term knows it. But I wanted to share it with you guys because it's while it is inspiring and all that, Michael, he's just been very important in my progression. He's helped me out a lot. And although he does take a lot of shots at me on Twitter and I take them back, I just wanted to tell this story because it means a lot to me because of how helpful he's been. And it's a business where it's hard to find someone that is helpful for good reasons. And, they actually look out for you for the right reasons. And I feel as if that's what Michael has done, of course. There could be more to it, but from what I know, it's been all good from Michael. He's been a lot of help to me, and I thought this was a story, while it's not on a huge platform, deserved to be told in some shape or form, and I'm happy that we got to do that today. So I want to thank you for coming on and being honest with us about everything. It was great.
Well, Brandon, you know what they say is the people that you give the hardest amount of time to are the people that you like the most, because you can get away with it. And we live in a society where it's not as easy, it's not as masculine, and to say, hey man, I appreciate you, I like you. So instead, you do the other thing that's like back when you're a kid and you liked the girl when you were like 8 or 9 years old. You used to push her and knock her down, and that's generally the world that we live in still today.
Oh yeah, exactly. I'm happy I'm the little girl that you push around in the weird way that sounds.
Wow, that actually is precise. That you said it better than I could ever say it, but yes, you're the little girl I like to push around.
All right, you can follow him on Twitter at Michael Spath, ITH. You can listen to Inside the Huddle Monday through Friday on WTKA 1050 AM or WTKA.com. He has a great show, a lot of cool things going on there, cool segments. You can listen to me on there every now and then. I'll start going on weekly eventually, and I'll be sure to let you guys know when that does happen. So I appreciate Mr. Spath coming on. Look out for him in the radio sphere as well as his sometimes gutsy Twitter calls as well. So, Mr. Spath, I appreciate you coming on. I will see you soon, my friend.
Sounds good.
All right, guys, we're going to head to break. You are listening to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
I want to tell you about our newest sponsor, Team Top Cat Sales. Are you looking for team apparel for your high school, your club sports team, or corporation? Look no further than Top Cat Sales, located on the east side of Main Street in downtown Royal Oak, between 11 and 12 Mile. Through founder and former University of Michigan QB John Wangler's leadership, Top Cat Sales has developed a tradition of selling and distributing custom Adidas team apparel with the highest quality and best service. Get your organization, school, or club team all in with Adidas today by going to TopCatTeamSales.com. That's TopCatTeamSales.com. Also, follow Top Cat on Twitter at Team Top Cat.
All right, guys, welcome back to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Today we are joined, obviously, by Michael Spath before. Now we're joined by Sam Beisheisen from the Indiana Rivals site. You can read all of their stuff on the Indiana Rivals site, which is indiana.rivals.com. Sam is still a Hoosier at Kelly School, right? At the journalism school?
I am, yeah.
So Sam is a beat writer covering the football team for the Hoosiers down in Bloomington. Obviously, he's headed north to cover the Wolverines in Ann Arbor. Are you going to be here this weekend, or are you going to cover it from home?
Oh no, of course, yeah. The only one I couldn't get to this year was Maryland because not Maryland, Rutgers. I'm sorry, they're the same in my head.
Right.
Rutgers, because getting to Rutgers is impossible. There's no easy way to get there. So I'm looking forward to being in Ann Arbor this weekend. Yeah,
it's not too far away, so we're happy to have you. It'll be good to see you again. Haven't seen you since I think July, back at Big Ten Media Day. So it'll be cool to see the man Sam again. Bringing him on to give us a little look across the field at what Indiana brings to the table and kind of just what the feel is in Bloomington as well coming into this game. Obviously at 5-5, they're fighting to get bowl eligible. I think they'll get that next week regardless against Purdue, but nonetheless, to win 7 is better than to win 6 is a good way of thinking about that. So, Sam, tell us a little bit about the feel in Bloomington this week, what practice was like, what Kevin Wilson has said about Jim Harbaugh and the Wolverines in general.
Sure, yeah, you kind of just touched on it there. But I think generally people around this program, probably people within the program just don't want to admit it, understand that winning this weekend against Michigan is just incredibly unlikely. It's just not going to happen. But at the same time, you can't go out and say that because they are fighting for their bowl hopes. And right now, like you said, they're at 5 wins. You don't want to have to wait till the last game of the year and have to beat Purdue at home in the old rivalry game, even though everybody seems to be able to beat up on Purdue this year. But that just seems more realistic at this point, that they'll lose this weekend, beat Purdue, then go bowling. But generally, I think this is an Indiana program that at this point, everybody on the roster, everybody in the coaching staff believes they can beat virtually any team just because they have been a team full of chaos these last few years. We saw it last year with them going toe-to-toe with Michigan until the very end. Last week, they just gave Penn State a pretty big scare. They've scared Ohio State 2 or 3 times in a row now. I don't understand how they do it because talent-wise, they're not there. They're not at the Michigan level. But with gimmicks and different packages and Kevin Wilson just coming up with a bunch of garbage that somehow works, they end up competing against teams. So I think generally they're excited about this. They know they have nothing to lose. And Kevin Wilson, he really likes Jim Harbaugh. You can tell because they're both kind of cut from that same cloth of a little weird, a little odd, a little different. They like to do their own things their way. And I'm excited for it. I think these guys are excited too.
So with the Hoosiers, and I wanted to point out what you said on how you don't know how they do it, but they've been pulling it off. They've pulled off a lot of scares over the past few seasons in general, just in Kevin Wilson's tenure, which, by the way, I'm definitely a fan of what he's doing there. So I hope I'm not sure if he's been extended or not, but I hope they retain him. But
he has been. Last year he got a 5-year extension.
Good.
So he'll be here for a while.
Good, because I know there was talk about whether or not he would. So a good thing that he did, because he's doing some great things for Indiana, because it's never been a football school. We all know it's always been a basketball school, and it's never going to be a football school, but it's definitely on the horizon of getting closer and closer to above just middle of the pack in the Big Ten, which is good, but they'll probably stay there, but it's hard to put them above that. But there's somebody that can. I think it is Mr. Wilson. So looking at the schedule that Indiana has this year, they've been in some tight games the entire season. I mean, that Ohio State game on paper, 38-17, doesn't look like it. But if you watch that game, a couple late scores from Ohio State really pumped the stats there, which in a college football playoff era where margin of victory is seen as the biggest stat, that's something that you have to do if you're Urban Meyer and the Buckeyes. But that game was tight, and it came down to, in my opinion, play calling, where Indiana had some plays where they were going a little too conservative, a little too cute, trying to stay in a game that they were tight in. That's a game where you, in my opinion, kind of have to put it all on the line. You're going to have to make that mistake in order to make the big play. But looking at some other ones beyond just that game, I mean, they lost to a surprisingly decent Wake Forest team by just 5. They lost to Nebraska by 5, Northwestern by 10. And then obviously last week, Penn State gets a scoop and score late in the game to go up 14, but that game was down to the wire until the very end as well. So this team is on the cusp of getting that upset victory, getting that signature victory. From what you've seen, from being on the beat all season, what has been the one thing that's been missing in those games to put them over the hump to win?
Yeah, that's a golden question. I mean, like you said, last week they're up 10 on Penn State with 18 minutes left, and you're sitting there going, how are they going to manage to screw this up? Well, they're going to give up, 34 points or whatever it was in the last 18 minutes. That's how they're going to screw it up. What they're lacking, I still think, and this is cliche, and I hate cliches, but I still think it's just an emotional thing. It's the fact that they can't seem to put it together once. So because they can't do it that first time and prove it to themselves, they just crumble. And for whatever reason, they can't make those gamble plays at the end of games. I feel like they gamble early, like you kind of mentioned with Ohio State. They'll gamble early, they'll take risks, and those risks will pay off, and they'll be in a game, they'll be competitive. But then when the game gets close near the end and you start to think, okay, how many scores do we need or how many stops do we need? They start going uber conservative, and they start running the ball. Then all of a sudden 3 and out come up. Defensively, they start to play prevent defense, and they start giving up chunks of yards at a time. And they just don't have enough talent where they can afford to go conservative against these teams. They have to risk it for a whole 60 minutes. And for whatever reason, they just refuse to do that. And it's so frustrating sitting up there and go like, just keep doing what you were doing. Keep throwing the ball, airing it out. Force them to beat you. Don't beat yourself. That's what they do, and that's what's keeping them from getting over that hump, that hill, that glass ceiling, whatever you want to call it. It's just they get too conservative at the end of the games. They get too cute. I liked your phrasing there. Kevin Wilson says the same thing. And the fact that they haven't done it before is still bogging them down. And I thought they had it a couple years ago when they beat Mizzou on the road. I thought that was it, and then their quarterback gets hurt. Okay, so much for that. I thought they did it earlier this year when they beat Michigan State at home. As it turns out, Michigan State is trash, and there was never any reason to tear down the goalposts like they did. In retrospect, that looks stupid. I mean, they were partying like they had won a national championship. At the end of the day, they just have to beat somebody, and I think then more wins will come. But it's going to be awful hard to make that happen this week against the Michigan team that's just good everywhere.
So for Indiana, and it's been a primarily offensive program for as long as we can remember, but the defense has been significantly better this season. And although it wasn't seen, like you said, in those final 18 minutes against Penn State, they kind of, I guess they were exposed, the defense that had been relatively pretty decent, maybe even better than decent the entire season, really showing signs of life. And I think that going forward in the next couple of seasons with that defensive scheme getting better and better, it'll be a weapon for them. But speaking on just this week with Indiana, looking at the offense, and like I said before, it has been a primarily offensive team. I mean, the loss of Jordan Howard was extremely tough. You see what he's doing with the Bears. Divine Redding, still good in my opinion, but it's been a pass-heavy team. Am I wrong? It's been a pass-heavy team with Richard Lago, his large arm. I mean, he's thrown for over 2,800 yards, which is significantly better than Wilton Spate's 2,100. But they've also attempted 364 passes compared to Michigan's just 280. It's a team that either is getting the ball more, and as up-tempo they are, probably getting more plays in general. It's two very, and I think this is always the case between a Hoosier and a Wolverines game, very opposite schematical teams. Michigan, they play their offense so much so the other team doesn't get the ball back. That's how they play. They play it and they weigh down the clock. They're going to take all 40 seconds off there, and then they're going to run it up the middle for a 2-yard run. But by the time their drive is over, if they ran 6 plays, they ran 3 minutes off the clock. Indiana is the complete opposite. If you go to 3 now in Indiana, you can get the ball back in 20 seconds? I mean, that's really how it is. It's very up-tempo. It's very, all right, we got to go. And that's how they got close to defeating Michigan last season. Again, that was a Michigan team that I find significantly less mature, significantly weaker in general. Just the players have gotten so much stronger in the strength and conditioning program that's been introduced. And that's just my opinion based on last year's game compared to this year's. So Michigan, going into last year's game, had a hangover against Maryland before that after losing to Michigan State. This season, they lost to Iowa. Now they have to go back home. But for me, it's senior day. This is a team that's going to be very emotionally driven on the field, probably without Wilton Spate, which is obviously going to be the story of going in, and everyone's going to talk about it. More than likely going to be without their starter, Wilton Spate, who has seen extremely great strides in the second half, and then really hit the brakes against Iowa. Probably had a lot to do with whatever problem is going on. Obviously, we don't know if it's a broken collarbone or not at this point. Jim Harbaugh, smartly, in my opinion, in a smart way, he does the right thing. Not giving away injuries. It's not beneficial for media, but at the end of the day, they're not out there to make us look good or help us any. They're out there to win football games. And, making Coach Wilson and the rest of the Indiana staff have to guess, who's going to be in there, it's tough. It's not easy. What's the talk been down in Bloomington about who's going to be quarterback and how they've been preparing for it?
Yeah, like you said, it is tough. It's so hard when you have to prepare for multiple guys. I mean, that's why I'm with you. I credit Jim Harbaugh there. If your starter gets hurt, don't say anything, nothing. Surprise everybody that first week that he comes out and you go, oh, who's this guy? Because it just works. It makes it so much better. I don't get why anybody would want to reveal injuries. But much in the same way that Indiana toyed with this dual threat quarterback system where they were playing actually 3 quarterbacks at once. They had Richard Lago, he would come out, and they'd play a freshman running back who was a quarterback in high school, Tyler Nate, and Xander Diamont, the scrambling quarterback that started after Nate Sudfeld got hurt a few years ago. They've been kind of putting quarterbacks in and out of the system, mostly, I think, just because it makes you think about it, it makes you prepare for it, it makes you spend X amount of minutes of practice saying, okay, we have to do this or that. I think it's very much the same way with Michigan right now. Is Indiana has to look at an O'Korn in State, and you have to say, okay, we have this game plan for this guy and this game plan for this guy, and that's how you work. It didn't sound like Kevin Wilson knew, where Michigan was leaning. I mean, reports can come out that somebody's hurt, and Kevin Wilson will just laugh at it and say, I haven't seen the kid, so I don't know. I have to imagine they're preparing mostly for State, but knowing that in the back of their heads they might not see him. Kevin Wilson's really quick to say coaches don't change too much based on what players are in there. It's the same playbook. They're not going to change it too radically. So he'll probably bank on that in practice all week. He'll probably have just said, okay, they're going to run these plays anyway. We'll prepare for them. But I do think that they're expecting to have to deal with changes, I guess, in the offense is the best way to put it. I think Kevin Wilson would kind of have to expect to see a lot of Jabril Peppers somehow in the Wildcat. It's hard to get a feel for what he's thinking other than he's not really expecting anything. And that's the toughest thing to prepare for.
And I want to touch on what you said regarding the quarterback switch and having to prepare for both. And I tweeted this out earlier in the week, but I know a lot of people were freaking out. It was kind of split here. It was a lot of, Spate's out, what are we going to do? And then it was a lot of, we trust John O'Korn. Because John O'Korn had, I think, 5,000 all-purpose yards down in Houston his freshman season. Obviously, things went wrong in his second season there, and then he ended up transferring. This is his first year back. But that is, I think, and I'm like, okay, if you're Indiana, the only film you have on John O'Korn is from the spring game against his own team, against his own defense, who's definitely not out there trying to hit him as hard as they can. And half of them are backups, if not worse, significantly worse than that, considering Michigan starting a lot of true freshmen who weren't in the spring game. And then you have to think back to, okay, if you want to look at a legitimate game, him in legitimate game form, where they're trying to hit the quarterback, where they're trying to get after him, you have to go back to his freshman season, which is nearly 3 years ago. And that's if you're preparing for O'Korn. And then while you're preparing for O'Korn, you're like, okay, shouldn't we spend time preparing for Spate because he might come in too? So it's a lot of difficulty if you're a Michigan fan, not knowing whom your quarterback's going to be or what to expect, or if they can lead your team if it's John O'Korn. But if you're Indiana, you're having a lot of time preparing for the actual football game, while behind the scenes, the staff, the people who actually matter, know exactly who the quarterback's going to be, and they're preparing exactly for that, and they're practicing exactly for that too. Everybody else outside of that little hall inside of Ann Arbor has no idea what's going on. And to me, that's pure genius.
I agree with you. I think that's exactly what I would do. I think people give, coaches a hard time for that. Mostly people that are probably gambling on games and
right.
have too much invested in this. I think it's the smartest thing you could do. And if anything, it's going to be an advantage for 1 week. Whatever it is, that quarterback issue, whatever it is, it's going to be an advantage for 1 week. Then it becomes revealed to everybody, and you don't have that advantage anymore. You might as well You might as well use it. And in this case, you're using it against Indiana.
All right, Sam, we got to ask you before we let you go. Can we get your prediction for the game?
Sure. I don't think it's going to be very pretty. I think I'm going to drive 6 hours from Bloomington to see Michigan win 52-19. I truly do not think that this Indiana team has anything right now. I think they're probably looking at Purdue. I've had a bad feeling the last few weeks that Indiana was due to get totally blown out, and it hasn't happened yet. And with Michigan needing as many style points, win by margin of infinity, you know what I mean? Win by as much as you can.
Right.
I think they're going to go to town on Indiana this week. I really do. And most of that's a gut feeling, because I don't think Indiana's too far off from this next tier of schools. I really don't. They're building something there. But the defense has been shaky the last few weeks. They play a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores in that secondary, and it seems to be getting it's freshman wall time. They're starting to waver back and forth. Richard Lego's going to take a bunch of gambles, and he's already got a 5-pick game this year, 5 fumbles last week alone. A lot of wheels are starting to squeal and shake, and if it's going to fall off, I think this is the week, and I just got a bad feeling about it.
All right, well, we want to thank Sam for coming on. A lot of good stuff there. Always a great guy to talk to. You can follow him on Twitter at Sam_, and I'm going to spell this out for you guys because it'd be impossible to spell yourself based off just the word of mouth. It's BEISHUIZEN. Simply put, Sam Zen. You could be the Zen, just like Phil Jackson.
I like that.
Right.
I should actually change it to that, and I'll work on that. Seriously,
legally.
Thank you, Brandon. It was a pleasure.
All right, Sam, we appreciate you having you on, and I will see you on Saturday in the press box.
Yes, you will. Thanks, man.
All
appreciate
right,
it.
Take care. All right, guys. Well, that was Sam Boheisen, and that's my best guess because he's explained it to me a million times. I've always thought it was Boheisian. It's just so hard to get down. But we appreciate Sam coming on. Truly a great guy. A little bit of a backstory to that. He was at the golf course, and he took the time to go off of it and talk to me. So we really appreciate him over at indiana.rivals.com. Obviously, Indiana is more of a basketball school, but he is the football guy there in a growing football school, so we appreciate him coming on. All right, guys, just got breaking news here that Jim Harbaugh was just named George Munger Coach of the Year semifinalist. Well-deserved. Just to add that in, and honestly just popped up on my phone. So that'll pump all you guys up for the mayor of Ann Arbor. Got about 13 minutes left here for showtime today. Hey, I'm happy we got to have 2 guests on today. I think it's awesome to have those kind of conversations, a lot more entertaining, not only for me, but I think for you guys to listen to 2 people go back and forth. This is a lot better than just me babbling, even though me babbling is cause for returned listeners lately, which I appreciate, by the way. We're going to end this off the same way we always end it off. A little bit of recruiting, my final 5, my best 5 of the day, and then send you guys off for game day. All right, first off, I want to talk a little bit about recruiting. Michigan having a pretty decent week of recruits visiting. I think it's going to be the most number-wise this week, probably upwards of 60 plus going to be visiting Michigan. Again, probably only about 10 to 15 of those, if that, are going to matter. A lot of kids like to just come and visit because they're allowed to, especially the locals. But probably about 10, 15, I would say upwards of 20 probably matter. A lot of 2018 kids that would probably be here, maybe without an offer, that could walk away with one. But that's what you're probably going to get out of this weekend recruiting-wise. Look at the visitors here. There's obviously a few with a big name, tied to them. You got Torrey Carter. He's a 3-star fullback. I know that doesn't sound sexy at all, but in the Jim Harbaugh offense, fullback matters so much to him. and he's losing Henry Poggi, and he's losing Khalid Hill, his vulture, this year. Last year, he lost Joe Carriage, and he lost Sione Uma, who were both incredible fullbacks. I mean, we haven't seen the big runs from fullbacks like we saw last year, but we saw, we've seen Khalid Hill get a lot of touchdowns. I think he's at 10 now, both receiving and rushing combined. And so he needs a fullback, and that's what he likes to get. I don't know if he's going to take one in this class. Obviously, Chase Lassiter was a fullback committed beforehand, but I don't think any of us really thought he was ever capable of coming to Michigan for multiple reasons, talent being one of them. I just never saw it in him. I mean, he had a huge physique. He was cut like Hercules, but that was about it. With Torrey Carter, he's rated as the number 1 fullback in the country. No fullback's going to be high in the national rankings, but he's currently committed to LSU. So you got to pry him away from there, a school that lost their head coach, Les Miles, which I'll get to in just a moment. And now he has to commit to a school where he doesn't know who his coach is going to be. It could be Coach O, Ed Orgeron, currently the head coach, who could stay. And I don't think it would be wise because they need to get after a big name. You're in LSU. But again, not down there to make that kind of opinion. Chip Kelly's been tied to the name of it and all of that. But nonetheless, Torrey Carter could be a guy that could pull away. Again, Torrey Carter is a teammate of Otis Reese, a 2018 commit, who is also going to be visiting, and he's also a teammate of Aubrey Solomon, defensive tackle, 4-star, formerly committed to Michigan, presumed the leader in Michigan's defensive targets right now, or defensive tackle targets, I should say, and apparently, according to some reports, and from what I can dig up, Michigan still leads for Solomon as well, going into a couple of visits he's going to take, and it sounds like those are going to be to his in-state Georgia Bulldogs, who are struggling, and then Alabama, who is very far from struggling. That won't be interesting, but I still think, based on recent developments, that Solomon ends up in the class. Touching on Les Miles, he's going to be a visitor as well. He's going to be one of the guys in the stands. He might be on the sidelines, we'll see, for the Michigan-Indiana game. Obviously, the former LSU head coach played for Bo Schembechler here, and he also coached here as an assistant to, could have been Bo and Lloyd Carr. I can't go back and remember that. I think it was under Gary Moeller, though. So he was an assistant here at Michigan in the late 90s, and then he went on to head coach at Oklahoma State, and then obviously got the LSU job. I think it was 13 or 14 years later. Somehow got fired, and now he is on the free agent market, and he's spending a weekend off in Ann Arbor, his home, his alma mater, coming to see the Wolverines. And what do you know? Torrey Carter, an LSU commit, is going to be there. And what do you know? He used to be committed to Les Miles. I don't think it has anything to do with it. I think it's all coincidence, but nonetheless, will be a good pitch for Michigan should they talk to him or have Les Miles talk with him, which I don't know if it's legal under NCAA violations, but too long of a list for me to make up. Now, the biggest visitor is obviously 5-star offensive tackle out of Brooklyn Poly Prep, New York, Isaiah Wilson. I think he's 6'7", 310 pounds, as big as it gets, an enormous anomaly on the offensive line. A lot of mechanics for him to work on some in order for him to really live up to that 5-star potential, but the raw talent is better than anybody in the country when it comes to raw talent and size to work with. Maybe not as much as Alex Leatherwood, but Wilson will be on hand. He's a guy that I think is going to commit to Michigan. Will it happen on the visit? I'm not sure. I think he'll be a guy to announce at the Under Armour game he's participating in, the Under Armour All-American game. But as for him, I do think he eventually chooses Michigan. Some commits on hand will be Benjamin St. Just, Kurt Taylor, St. Just 4-star cornerback, Taylor 3-star running back, Zach Sheffer, 2018 3-star tight end from Nice High School, same school as Tim Tebow, will be on hand as well. He's one of 3 serious targets for Michigan at the tight end position in 2018. Class they'll probably take 2 in because it sounds like they won't take any this year, and they'll be losing a couple. I mean, obviously losing Jake Butt, possibly Ian Bunting next year, etc., etc. The other 2 they're after are 4-star Mustafa Muhammad from Missouri City, Texas, and then also after Jeremy Ruckert from Long Island, New York. As for the recruiting roundup, got my bold prediction. Isaiah Wilson could commit this weekend. I don't think he does this weekend, but I think it happens eventually, and that's probably what we're going to get from these visitors. This has been planned for a while for Wilson, I think, since the summer, so this official visit isn't, it isn't last minute or anything like that. It's been a long developed visit, so I think that it's down to Bama and Michigan for him, and I think he chooses Michigan. And finally, we have my favorite segment of the day. We have our final 5, top 5 games of the week. I got to talk about some upsets before we go into it here. Last week, I, again, picked my upset of the week successfully. Doc witnessed it when I picked Ole Miss to defeat Texas A&M. But the week before that, I picked Arkansas to beat Florida. So it's back-to-back weeks with successful upset picks. Now, I couldn't record this in time to make my pick for Louisville-Houston, but I did tweet out that exact words were college football playoffs really shake up when Louisville loses by 17 tonight. Got a lot of angst for that one. A lot of people said it was dumb, and Houston was, a past team that doesn't matter anymore. They were hot for a minute there, and I was generous with that 17-point marginal, prediction, because Houston went out there and won 36-10. They won by 26 points. Really proud of myself for that one. Again, not to boast. You can get the siren out if you want, but the upset picks, they've been there. They really have. So we're looking at the top 5 of the week, and then I'm going to predict Michigan, Indiana, and get out of here. And we're going to do all of that in under 5 minutes. Number 1, Washington State, Colorado. That's going to be an incredible game. 2 teams in the Pac-12 that actually played defense. Mike Leach, an amazing head coach. Colorado, the same with their head coach. He's up for Coach of the Year, named Bill McCartney. And Colorado, Sefo Liufau, that quarterback, as good as it gets. Quarterback-wise, maybe not in the country, but definitely in the Pac-12. They have a mean defensive line. That one's going to be a great game. And that one's hosted in Boulder. So I'm going to take the home team here. Both teams 8-2. Washington State at number 20. Colorado at number 10 in the college football playoff rankings, but this says 12 because of the AP rankings, of course. I have Colorado winning that game. I'm going to go with 38-34. Yeah, sorry. I meant to say 34. But so at 38-34, I like Colorado in that game. Again, that makes Michigan's schedule look better because that would keep them in another top 10 ranking victory. And then I'm going to go to Oklahoma, West Virginia. This one is hosted in Morgantown, one of the craziest places in the country. If my family is listening to this, shout out to them because a lot of West Virginia fans in my family all root from there. Then they're in Kentucky. Oklahoma and West Virginia, number 10. West Virginia, number 8. Oklahoma could be different in the college football playoff. I think West Virginia is actually 11, and Oklahoma is 9 in the college football playoff. I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. Listen, I like West Virginia in this game because they play really, really, really good defense. You haven't seen that in recent years from the Mountaineers. You haven't seen that from a lot of teams in the Big 12. But West Virginia is one of those teams that plays great defense in the Pac-12. And I think that's a team that can at least slow down D.D. Westbrook and at least contain and get to Sam Bradford. Because I don't think Oklahoma's offensive line is all that. And I think Michigan, head's in the wrong place. I always think about Michigan. But West Virginia, I think their defensive line is strong enough to get to Sam Bradford. I like West Virginia in that game. 34-20. Yeah, 34-31. That'll be a tight one. West Virginia's been in some tight games lately. It's in Morgantown. That'll be the difference. Loud stadium there. I got 3 more left. Another one that I like here is Oklahoma State, TCU, sticking to the Big 12. My 2 least favorite conferences in the Power 5, Pac-12, Big 12. All 3 of these games I've picked so far, Big 12 or Pac-12. TCU and Oklahoma State number 13. Of course, one of those 2 losses for them from Central Michigan on that crazy last-second play. TCU 5-4. Baylor by 40 points, I think a week or 2 ago. I like TCU in this game. It's in Fort Worth. I like them probably 56-48. I mean, it's going to be a Big 12 game. That's always the final score. So go 56-48. I like TCU. Actually, let's go 56-49 because that would put it at 7, which makes more sense. So we'll go TCU in that game. And then another one here, we're going to go down to a real conference, the SEC, Florida, LSU. I like LSU big in this one, though. I think it's going to be a good game to watch, but it's in Baton Rouge. Coach O probably needs a win to keep his job alive here, or what job it is, I guess, to keep the interim job. He's not going to get fired by any means, but, it'll help him, have that on his resume for when he applies for the head coaching job, I'm assuming. I like LSU in this game in Baton Rouge. I like it. LSU, whose offense came alive last week, and Florida lost to Arkansas a couple of weeks ago big. I think they won last week, but again, I just don't put a lot of stock into the Gators. I like LSU 28-17. And we've got one more. I didn't do this in order, so this one doesn't mean it's the best one. I still think the best one is going to be first one I went with, which was Washington State, Colorado. But I like my 5th one to be Michigan, Indiana. And I want that to transition into the last one that I pick as well, because I think this is going to be a tight game. I know Sam picked it to be 58-19. But I like Michigan and Indiana. I like the matchup because it presents 2 completely opposite teams, 2 looks at a lot of, neither team has seen too much of. I mean, Indiana gave Michigan problems last year. Obviously, it was in Bloomington, but nonetheless, that game went to double overtime. Michigan's coming off a loss to Iowa, possibly going to be a new quarterback in there. The stars just line up for Indiana to possibly win this game, or Michigan to completely blow them out if they can pull it all together. And it's one of the 2. I think it's going to be tight. I don't think Indiana wins. I think Michigan wins this one 28-24, a tight game. Michigan's offense under a new quarterback will have to get used to that. I think O'Korn gives a lot of firepower, though, a lot of potential to do big things, and I think that's what Sam thinks he's going to see out of it with a 59-19 final prediction that he had. But I like Michigan in this one, 28-24. I think they lead 28-17 with like 2 minutes left, and Indiana just scores one. So I still think they win by like 2 possessions, but I think that's closer than people will think it's going to be. But still like the Wolverines, and that brings us to Columbus with 2 10-1 teams, which will be extremely interesting and a great podcast. I appreciate you for tuning in for another week. We've only got one more week of game day left, and then we'll have the bowl week, obviously, and all of that. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in to the Justice Report on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Follow me on Twitter at Land of Justice. Follow the podcast at Detroit Podcast. All of my words in writing, landoftent.com/Michigan. That was the Justice Report. Enjoy game day.
Who's got it better than us?